Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching.
How do we know what happened last week, last year, 1,000 years ago? How are memory and history different? And what are the special challenges scholars face in reconstructing world history from the many individual and collective memories of people around the globe?
World history is a dynamic process, and although all history is selective in some way or another, world history, because it is all about the patterns and the processes of the past, identifying those patterns means that it's important to know who's telling the story.
All people recall the past and retell it, not just through the written word, but also through myth, legend, art, and performance. Dance, theater, and ritual all can be used to recreate the past. Of course, no recounting of the past, even by historians, is ever complete. The stories both history and memory tell are, by nature, selective.
We all have memories, but individual memory can become collective memories when they are embraced as emblematic of a group's experience. In pre-literate societies, these memories transmitted from generation to generation can become shaped into a group's oral history. In literate societies, history can be based upon both memories and written documents. Both memory and history are selective interpretations of the past, which may change with the storyteller, with the patron, with the professional historian, and always change over time.
Like all historians, world historians create narratives of the past from records of individual and collective experiences. And they interpret the past in response to questions shaped by the world they live in. So, the construction of world history reflects the same global processes that have both integrated the experiences of people all over the world and highlighted the differences among them. And world history, like all of history, is an arena of disagreement and challenge, subject to ever-changing interpretations. The complex relationship between history and memory can best be demonstrated through historical example. How did new evidence and new ways of interpreting artifacts transform historians' understanding of the ancient Maya in Mesoamerica? How can a community such as the Luba people in southern Congo remember and preserve their past without written texts? And finally, how is collective memory represented and contested in the public realm? Insights into a community's collective memory and the changing interpretations of the past can be revealed through the example of Christopher Columbus, once considered to have discovered America.
In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Well, the Columbus that I remember growing up is not the Columbus we think about today. He was the great hero, the admiral of the ocean sea, the man who stood on the deck and faced down these mutineering sailors. But we have a much sober view, and I think a more nuanced view of Columbus. We remember him differently now because the world around us has changed, and we have asked new questions about Columbus, almost to the point that the Columbian voyages have become more the fascinating part of it than the man himself.
First introduced as a symbolic founder shortly after the American Revolution, Christopher Columbus eventually became a revered icon of the American nation, early historians made connection between the history of the nation and the Age of Discovery. That is, the initial encounters between Europeans and native inhabitants of the Americas. The United States, Spain, and Italy each adopted Columbus into their national myths. By doing so, they strengthened the European claim to the Americas. Washington Irving's biography of the Admiral appeared in almost 200 editions and was translated into 8 languages. Irving and other writers and historians promoted a heroic representation of Columbus. This image caught on with the American public. In 1882, Catholic men founded the Knights of Columbus, a fraternal organization which boosted Columbus as a Catholic and national hero. The Knights raised statues, paraded with floats, drum corps, and bands, and lobbied to have Columbus Day declared a national holiday. A decade later, to mark the 400th anniversary of Columbus's first voyage, organizers at the 1893 Columbian Exposition, the World's Fair in Chicago, staged a reenactment of Columbus's arrival. Buffalo Bill Cody invited 100 Lakota Sioux from Pine Ridge, Standing Rock, and Rosebud reservations to witness the ceremonies in full regalia, and 12 of them played the role of a welcoming party of Arawak Indians.
The Columbus that America celebrated 100 years ago was a Columbus that American Indians remembered probably very selectively. They knew very well that the coming of Europeans, by dint of the Columbian voyages, had terrible long-range effects on them. Had decimated their peoples and turned them into people who lived on these so-called slums in the wilderness, that is, on reservations.
Writing 50 years later in 1942, historian Samuel Eliot Morison still championed the patriotic perspective of Columbus as the first American.
Never again may mortal men hope to recapture the amazement, the wonder, the delight of those October days in 1492, when the New World gracefully yielded her virginity to the conquering Castilians. To the people of this New World, pagans expecting short and brutish lives, void of hope for any future, had come the Christian vision of a merciful God and a glorious heaven.
This was the dominant historical view in the mid-20th century. But in the 1960s and 70s, the perception of Columbus and the Columbian voyages began to change. An important benchmark of this reinterpretation was the work of historian Alfred Crosby. In his 1973 book, The Columbian Exchange, Biological and Cultural Consequences of 1492, Crosby presented an entirely different perspective on the significance of Columbus's voyages, their global impact, and their role in world history.
When Alfred Crosby's book, The Columbian Exchange, came out 30 years ago, it was explosive. It took the focus off Columbus, the Admiral, and redirected our attention to the long-range consequences of those 4 Columbus voyages to the Americas. The Columbian voyages unleashed huge new forces in the world. For starters, it unleashed a holocaust, a biological holocaust, because some 50 to 100 million native people of the Americas had never been exposed to European diseases, such as diphtheria and smallpox, or scarlet fever and measles. And when those diseases came ashore with Columbus sailors, it was like setting a wildfire on a tinder, dry prairie.
As the 500th anniversary of the voyages approached, various views on the discovery of America began to be debated in the public sphere. In August 1992, the Library of Congress sponsored an exhibit called 1492, An Ongoing Voyage. In this exhibit, Columbus was presented as a mysterious and controversial figure who has been variously described as one of the greatest mariners in history, a visionary genius, a mystic, a national hero, a failed administrator, a naive entrepreneur, and a ruthless and greedy imperialist. Battle lines over Columbus were being drawn. Many indigenous groups in the Americas refused to celebrate an event which signified 500 years of genocide and oppression. Quincentennial celebrations planned for October 12, 1992, quickly became arenas where the past was fiercely contested.
About 20,000 Mexicans, many dressed in bright Indian costumes, filled the Central Plaza Monday to mourn the deaths of millions of Indians in the 500 years since the Spanish arrived in the New World.
In Columbus, Ohio, the largest city in the world named for the explorer, only about 2 blocks separated the opposing viewpoints.
Philadelphia police say protesters dressed in traditional Native American garb tossed red paint Sunday at a new monument honoring Christopher Columbus.
It's interesting to think about the words we use, the verbs we use to put Columbus into action and reaching the Americas. It used to be that he discovered the Americas. I mean, that was just taken as a given. He discovered the Americas. Well, now, wait a minute. If there were 70 million people already here, then he was finding his way to them, but he didn't discover them. So the words have moved from discovery to encounter, for some even invasion.
Not only had the perception of Columbus himself changed, but so had the reasons for seeing his voyages as important. Columbus was now being recognized for transforming the Atlantic Ocean from an impassable barrier to a bridge. The Columbian voyages set in motion processes that call for continual reevaluation by world historians. The controversy surrounding Columbus was played out in a public arena and was influenced by global decolonization and human rights movements. But the changing views of Columbus's voyages in world history were based in part on new evidence from archaeology. Tracing the physical presence of Columbus's landfalls in the Caribbean allowed Crosby and others to see the influence of these voyages in a new light. A similar transformation in interpretation of the past can be seen in the dramatic revision of views of the ancient Maya that took place over more than a century. Half a century ago, experts on the ancient Maya believed that they were a peace-loving, rural people ruled by kings and priest astronomers living in urban temple complexes dependent on slash-and-burn agriculture. Today, historians view the ancient Maya as a warlike urban people ruled by divine kings in densely populated cities supported by sophisticated farming. How did the study of the ancient Maya as a scholarly field emerge? And what happened to change the interpretation of the ancient Maya so dramatically in the past 50 years?
In the 1840s, a bored U.S. diplomat, John Lloyd Stephens, discovered in the jungles of southern Mexico and Central America ruins of abandoned cities of great beauty and sophistication. Stephens believed that it was the ancestors of the Maya, the local indigenous peoples, who had built Palenque, Copan, and Uxmal. But more racist European experts refused to believe that such primitive Indians could create an art and architecture of such sophistication. So they invented elaborate theories of migrating Egyptians and wandering Jews to explain it. There was also no agreement about the Mayan glyphs, with some seeing them as phonetic signs, and others claiming that they were logograms, ideographic picture writing. The debate that followed marked the start of modern Mayanology.
During the first half of the 20th century, one scholar held a virtual lock on Mayan scholarship. The Englishman, Sir Eric S. Thompson, actually bought archaeological sites and monopolized their excavation. And he attacked anyone who challenged his position.
Thompson insisted that the glyphs were not phonetic and that they did not represent words in the Mayan languages. He believed that they were logograms, pictorial representations of universal ideas like time.
One of the first events to shatter these myths about the Maya occurred in 1960. Architect Tatiana Proskoryakov examined the glyphs on monuments in newly discovered Mayan cities. She determined that the characters chronicled great families and events of Mayan history. In the 1970s, a series of conferences brought together a multidisciplinary team to crack the Mayan code. Experts in linguistics, anthropology, ethnohistory, archaeology, and art history all brought different questions and interpretations to the table. The late Mayan epigrapher and art historian Linda Schiele described how the team teased out meaning from the archaeological record.
The ancient Maya coordinated different systems of information in their objects so that pottery painting, narrative sculpture, and architectural decoration not only pictured action, person, and context, but also included parallel and often complementary information in written texts.
We know now that the Mayan glyphs represent both a phonetic system, with 150 glyphs standing for spoken syllables, and a system of logograms, standing for whole words, but in the Mayan languages.
This panel of glyphs from the city-state of Palenque was discovered in 1921, but could not be completely deciphered until the 1990s. Today, the panel reveals the story of the royal family of Palenque. For the first time, historians are able to construct a history of this ancient kingdom in the Americas. Piece by piece, the new evidence created a revolution in Mayan studies. Mayan script and art underwent a complete reinterpretation. Murals found in 1946 at Bonampak in southern Mexico were now understood to be depictions of war, torture, and human sacrifice. We know the ancient Maya through their artifacts and especially through their writing, but how have people without a written language conveyed their collective memory? How have they preserved and passed on their history? There are many ways of recording the past. The Luba and their ancestors have lived in the forests and savanna of the southern Congo in West Central Africa for over 15 centuries. They speak separate but closely related languages and use a variety of ways to keep historical records. Scarification and hairstyle are both marks of Luba identity that encode memory about a person's place in the history of Luba society.
The scarification really, in a literal way, embodies the past and is created as a kind of textured memory, if you will, of the body. It's a permanent record, and yet it can also change. The scarification marks can literally be read by someone who understands the cultural symbolism, yet the scarification marks also represent something that is never truly known in all of its depth. It's secret.
Skilled woodcarvers among the Luba practiced their craft on numerous items, such as this chief's royal staff. Markings on these staffs explain how the chief came to power and his relationship with the land. And this is called a lukasa, a memory board. It is the most important record-keeping device of Luba royal history. The carved wooden lukasa resembles a human torso. To most of us, these shells, beads, nails, studs, and other objects appear to be strewn across the surface at random. But the lukasa is a mnemonic device. Its purpose is to record and control knowledge. Secrets are encoded in the design and pattern. When interpreted by the Bana Balute, or men of memory, they provide both a geography and a history of village life and events. a public process of preserving and interpreting the past.
These are gatekeepers of historical information. The men of memory serve to control how much information is revealed about the past. Part of their role is really to reveal this paradox that there is information about the past and it has a power and a resonance that is both spiritual and also real, that relates to real events. And the memory that the Bana Balute is guarding is both collective memory and also individual memory. They're really the link between that collective and individual representation of the past.
The Luba are an example of people for whom history is an immediate and lived experience, the past continually interacting with the present. They demonstrate important ways in which people construct and preserve their own past. History has a powerful meaning in the present. It has an impact on the living. Museums collect, preserve, and interpret the past. They are both a repository and a representation of collective memory. But they can also represent a particular point of view of the past. They construct social memory, memory that can be challenged by alternative visions.
지금의 정령 협정을
In 1993, South Korean President Kim Young-sam expressed his desire to destroy the building which housed the National Museum in Seoul. It had been built during Japanese occupation of Korea as the headquarters for the colonial government, constructed with the forced labor of 50,000 Koreans. But since 1986, the building had housed South Korea's greatest historical and cultural treasures. The Korean president's plan to destroy the building generated great controversy. From the perspective of many Koreans, the National Museum building ultimately symbolized the suffering of the Korean people under Japanese rule. Their ancestral treasures were housed side by side with colonial memories. It was viewed as an icon of a painful past. Despite strong protests from architectural historians, on August 15, 1995, the Korean government demolished the building. It was the 50th anniversary of Korean independence from Japan. Today, the site of the old museum is a park. A few piles of rubble from the building remain as reminders of the bitter days of Japanese rule. In fall 1995, after the destruction of the building, an international design competition for a new museum was won by a Korean architect. The controversy over this building in Korea illustrates the ways national museums represent the past and embody collective memory. Commemorating the past is always a delicate and complex process, full of political meaning and often open to debate. In a sense, historical memory can be a very personal thing. Our experiences and those of our ancestors belong to us, and we have a stake in how they get presented.
All history, even ancient history, is contemporary history, because each generation and group rewrites that history in the light of their own values, perspectives, experiences, and concerns, so that even a history of the ancient Maya can be seen as having political implications for today. Historians may feel under external and internal pressure to shape their histories accordingly. This is even more likely when the subject is a contemporary history of trauma, and where the sources for that history are largely human memory. Memory, individual and collective, is an important source for history, especially for relating and analyzing the historical experience of individuals and groups who are unlikely to leave written documents. But memory can be a slippery source, particularly where traumatic or controversial events are remembered. Years later, people often remember not what they did, but what they wish they would have done. Not what a group did, but what it should have done. Individual and collective memories can also mix and merge in ways that raise questions of historical truth, the answers to which are often complex and not always clear. Rigoberta Menchú, the Maya activist who received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1992 for her work in defense of indigenous peoples of Guatemala, wrote a famous autobiography recounting the atrocities that she and they suffered. It has been attacked for making false claims as to what she personally saw and experienced, and defended as an accurate account of the collective experiences of her people. Both are true. The question for the historian is, what is the value of her testimony as a historical source? Is the question that different historians will answer differently. Those answers will shape their histories in different molds, creating a clash of historical interpretations. That is why history and memory are contested terrain.
History, a struggle over the past in the present to shape the future, is always contested terrain. Historians recognize memory as contested terrain. There will always be multiple contending versions of the past that must be sorted through and evaluated. The task for world historians is to construct an integrated past that retains voices of difference. World history in the 21st century will be created by an ongoing dialogue between the common and collective past and the many individual voices of memory that past contains.
Funding for this program is provided by Annenberg CPB to advance excellent teaching. For information about this and other Annenberg CPB programs, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.learner.org.